So I'm Dr. Alana James, and we're starting today. Our 15 minutes will be talking about reading, especially reading efficiencies. So I base this on a premise that, the knowledge economy is now decades old, and gone are the days when any of us could even assume we could pretend we knew everything about our fields. And it's only going to get worse, because I think last time I checked, the amount of knowledge that hits the web every day doubles very quickly. So we just have to give up the idea that we are going to be experts in the way that people used to be able to think they were experts. So what does this require of us? It requires that we are constantly dipping into what is new in literature, and that we are keeping abreast of at least the little waves we are on, because if we don't, we'll be quickly behind. And that means we need to be efficient. So today is about efficiencies. Now, I don't know, some of you could be master's students, some of you could be doctoral students. If you are newer to graduate education, you may be coming to this with the idea that you can read something. And real quickly, you're going to find there's just too much to really read in the way that you would read a book for any other purpose except for this. So part of the premise here is that efficiency means we know what parts of a document to target depending on what our particular need is. So I'm going to do this quickly in 4 ways. First, why are you reading it? What do others say about this? What does the system look like? Because you not only have to read it, you have to capture it, put it somewhere you can have it when you need it. And that's the tricky bit. And then we'll talk about what's coming up next. And as always, www.wooclap.com/15 minutes, all run together, is where we're going to answer questions. This allows you to write questions and be anonymous, which I have found is very useful. We get better questions and more of them. So anybody can feel comfortable saying anything. wooclap.com/15 minutes. I just put it up in the sticky notes. So why are you reading? Who will be your audience for later? And what kind of reflections do you need to capture? Different tools for different times, and how your reading actually changes. I chose 4 things, but if you are reading for a different purpose than one of these 4, and you want to jump into the chat real quick and give me another one, I'll add it on. But the 4 reasons I read technical research are because I need to see what's new in my field. I need to increase background literature. I need to, which is not the same thing. Those are 2 different reasons. They may overlap, but I'm reading differently. I need to research methodology, or I'm looking for models that I'm going to work with on the next thing I'm designing. I'm going to take them in that order. When you need to increase your background literature, you're reading more to see how others are seeing the scope of what you are seeing than to drill into the specifics of their research necessarily. So I find when I code my data, I'm reading background, I'm often coding their background sections. So they have started this by making assumptions about how things are, and it's quite likely I'm going to build on those assumptions, agree with them or disagree with them or use them in some way. So I'm going to read the background. I'm also going to read their conclusions, because from their conclusions I can see how their particular little swatch of data may or may not affect my particular little swatch of data. And that if it will affect it, then obviously I'll go back and I'll look at their, I may look at their research more in depth. But probably those two parts, basically the beginning and the end. Now, there are going to be a lot of thoughts here. And the biggest trick with all of this is to read and capture our thoughts quickly and efficiently. And I have found that the use of qualitative software helps me capture thoughts for background lit the most efficiently. And there are some other 15 minutes and there's some links. If you're interested in that, let me know. And I will give you some links about where you can find other things about how that's done. Skimming works. You don't have to read it all. You can do the first line, maybe the last line, get a general gist of what's going on, and then drill in when you need something, because what's in your mind is not what they are saying as much as how what they are saying may affect what you need it to affect. And then put up qualitative software and code it as you read it is what has worked for me. So in a qualitative place, I bring in the PDF, I'm skimming the PDF on the software, and then I can real fast go, oh, that was interesting. I think I'll code that as this, and I get the code right in there and I move on. That way it's always there for me. And it's very useful for developing lit reviews. And then you can always just connect it to your bit. From there, it's easy enough because you have the PDF in your software. You can connect it to your bibliographic software. I see the request for links, and don't go before I give them to you, but I see that. Okay. Now, it's different to read new research in your field because you don't know if it's going to affect what you do or not. You haven't brought it in because of that. You're in a place where you just kind of want to see what's happening. And one way to do that I find very useful is ResearchGate and academia.edu. You can put in keywords and you can see what people are putting up of their own work most recently. It can keep you attuned. And ResearchGate, if you have some keywords that you always go to, I think it's academia.edu actually sends you packets of things if you're interested in looking at them. Okay, so in this case, and this might be interesting to you, because I'm not sure very many people do this, I jump straight to what they call the significance of their work. So somewhere in that background section or in their abstract, they should be telling me who they think their work is significant to and why. Sometimes it's in the conclusion section. But I try to find it because if they think their work is significant to something that isn't, it might be really interesting. I might be intrigued by it, but I'm trying to be efficient with my use of time. So significance counts. Then I'll look at their methodology because that has something to say about how many people were, how big it is, what's its impact going to be on the significance, how they did it. It might drill into a particular little question really well, but if that's not my question, it's not a great fit, etc. So what you're doing when you're first looking at research is to think, is this a fit for my world? And if not, let it go. There's so many interesting things out there. Because I know I can't be the only one that's been finding down a rabbit hole of literature because I found it was interesting, but at the end of the day, I spent hours and my work didn't progress. And maybe then the final thing in new research is the background section. Now here, if you do find stuff that's important, then it's a totally different kind of note. Then it's a reflective note. It's somebody is making you think differently. Something new has happened. Oh, that's an intriguing idea. Now, you can do it in qualitative software. You can do it in the memo section. you can write longer reflective notes. But you can also do it, you could have an Evernote. I use Evernote for my note taking. I could have an Evernote open. I could also, if I'm really reflective, I'll write with like a tablet, except I use a Remarkable, so I can literally write. There's something quite significant about moving your hand and thinking. And if you like that, there is now technology that will help you do that and have it get to technology. But however it is, it's a bigger sense of stuff you want to capture. And you want to take the time right then to capture it. At least in my experience, I can have a pile of stuff I think is interesting, and by the time I get to it, I don't even remember why I thought it was interesting. So when the mind comes up and says, oh, yeah, capture that, there's something for me there, take the time to actually get it done. All right, so then with reflecting, it's what are they saying? What am I saying? Do I agree? What does it mean? Could it mean something to my practice now or later? And then these are definitely pieces you want to capture in your bibliographic software. And there might be a lower field in the bibliographic software for notes that might be a good place to put this reflecting. So some things to consider. Sometimes I don't have many reasons to research methodology anymore, but you might. And you haven't decided on it yet, or you're not sure, then you're going to read other people's work, and you're going to read the methodology section, and you're going to see if their questions are like your questions and how they did it, and whether you could get a sample kind of like they sample, or how it worked. Or if you're in the lab, whether their lab work was like your lab work, or how they wrote it up. There's a lot of reasons you'll be reading a methodology section for your own purposes as a model or a set of ideas, something to play back on. Sometimes you might use it if you're doing your study and somebody's kind of pushing at it on a methodological basis, like, I don't know if you should do it, you should do it this way. It's really useful for you to find somebody else that did it in the way you want to do it, and then to bring in fait accompli, this author did it this way, and see how it turned out. That helps back off criticism sometimes. So then in different kind of set notes, now you're in planning, figuring out how the pieces go together notes. And I like mind maps for this. I'm particularly fond of a tool called Miro, M-I-R-O, because they have a lot of templates that sort of suit the kind of work I do. But there are lots of tools to help you mind map, or paper and pencil, and Remarkable works as well. And this may not come in contact with your bibliographic software, because these may be ideas you're playing with, but you're not going to have to cite them later. Always just be on the lookout for, am I going to use this later, and am I going to need this citation? And if I am going to need this citation, capture it when you first do it, because I think all of us may have had experience where looking them up later is one of the worst things in the games that we play with academia. And then the final thing I want to talk about is I haven't seen any other people. Oh, yeah, Adrian has one. Okay, good. I have one more I'll do after this. But looking for models for my next great thing. So I'm pushing envelopes in how I'm going to publish. I'm pushing envelopes in how I'm going to present my work to the field of higher education. And I go to the business world looking for models about how they do it all the time. That might be true for you in your circumstance also, that the set way of doing it in the prescribed manner doesn't work for you completely. Maybe you have a great study right up for a journal, but you also want to publish it as a thought piece over here, but you're not quite sure what thought pieces look like. So then you go much wider net. You're much wider net. You're looking at the gray materials, websites, blogs, reports, all things that don't come under the standard peer review list, and you're looking at them not so much for what they say, but how they say it, how they put it together, how their thoughts chunked up. Do my thoughts chunk up that same way, and what can I do for it? Now, these are actually some of the toughest things to put aside and find when you need them later, because you need a stash place. and they're all different. The website's different kind of stash than a blog. And I have two things that I use here. I use Evernote because I can web clip pages from Evernote, and I can have a notebook in Evernote that is my latest project, and then I can stash things in that notebook. And I can do the same thing with PDFs in a file folder on my desktop that is the name of what my project is. And then I just slide PDFs. And that seems to be pretty good because they're limited time in my life. As soon as I'm beyond that project, probably I'm not coming back to those things again. And then I've been asked about to generate questions for guest talks on unfamiliar topics in my field. Okay, eventually to deepen my understanding of the different moving parts that make up my field. Okay, so this is a wide sweep. These are when we begin to search around keywords, and then we look at the documents that we found that were on the right track for us, and we go into their source data and we find out what keywords they listed. There will be some there we hadn't thought of, and we will search out those keywords. So it's a keyword to keyword juncture. And then you need some stash places, because probably over the course of time, the different moving parts will sort into clusters, and then those clusters can have their own stash places, folders within folders, notebooks within notebooks. But when you start, you just need to be able to pull them in and get them all together. And when you're doing a wide search, it isn't exactly reading as much as searching, I think. But when you're doing a wide net, I recommend that you do it in stages. So I would spend, because otherwise if you do it one at a time, you search, oh, that's interesting. Now I'm going to dig into that. And then I'm going to decide how I'm going to use that. And then I'm going to stash that. Oh, the whole thing takes forever. And you'll get to a point where you just hate this. But if you say, I'm going to spend 2 hours and I'm going to search, and all I'm going to do is search and stash, then it's done. Okay, then I can come back to the stash of yesterday, and I can sort it into keeping it, not keeping it, keeping it, not keeping it. And that'll already, my mind will be working for me on what those stash subfolders might look like. And then I can come back and I can quickly put them into those subfolders. When you do things like that in a list, you're using your subconscious mind to help you on the next step when you're using your conscious mind to help to finish up the step that you're on. And it keeps you less anxious and more satisfied, and things get done. You just have to do it day after day after day. You can't do that kind of a thing one day and then 2 weeks later you come back, because 2 weeks later you don't even remember why you put them all in the stash place. So that's a real fast fly, but the slides are in the handouts for you. So I always like to curate what others say. And when I looked up, I found it was interesting. So this man believes that browser reading is not ideal because of the distractions. So something to keep in mind. And he sees 2 phases of reading: a distracted expository reading, which is gathering the links, and then conscious reading, which is kind of what I just said to Adrian. And there's a link. He says also to consider, why are we reading? I agree with this. We are not reading for entertainment. We are not reading. We are reading because we want to learn and grow. And if I'm not learning and growing, even though it's interesting to me, I've got to be able to my metacognition has to be up enough where I can say not now. If I'm really interested, I can stash it somewhere else for later, but we want to keep on our focus, which also brings me to the fact that Pomodoro technique, it's a great time to use it. I'm running over my 15 minutes, so I'm going to slide through here. You can look at the slides. This woman talks about, she likes physical books, and she couldn't remember from how much, what she was reading. And so she talks about writing them up and other approaches. What I thought was interesting there is she likes to mark up paperbacks, but she doesn't mark up hardbacks. All my books have notes on them. Somebody told me once that if the book wasn't marked up, it wasn't loved. And this woman talks about it becoming a consciousness issue. And the point here I really agreed with was that the people who have gone before us in time, people who wrote in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s are probably much better writers than most of us today. And there will be some of the seminal work that is worth reading for two reasons, not just because these are the people who had the ideas that birthed everything we're doing, but also because the way they write is so nice. And for me, that's Chris Argyris, Donald Schoen, and to some extent, John Dewey. All men about the same period of time that just could use the English language in a really nice way. So more reasons why we read. And this person talks about it, how really it's a form of meditation. If meditation is, and mindfulness is, our ability to live our life and consciously breathe and also be aware of ourselves in the mix of what we are doing, then that's something we can do while we're reading as well. So if any of those ideas are more intriguing to you, I have given you the links. And this is one of the old ones who wrote very well about reading in a conscious and unconscious manner, and his language is beautiful. Okay. So what does my system look like? Again, I'm running out of time, so I'll fly. I think you've gotten the idea. My stash places are Evernote for web clips and folders. If I'm doing interactive work, I'm working in Slack. So I don't know what interactive or team-based tools you may have going, but my teams work in Slack, and it's really useful. And so I will use Slack to stash things if they are things I want my team or others to be playing off of as well. Methodology, I curate into the contributions. I make videos. So part of my output as a researcher, as you all know, are situations where I'm explaining more than I'm writing it. And so think about the breadth of publication in today's world and your contribution as including video links, as well as written things, as well as others. And then that can be curated. So you could find some interesting new ideas. So I'm going to play off of Adrian's suggestion about how she's looking broad across her field, trying to capture what's there. That might be the source of a really good 10-minute video. And that video could then play several ways, and it could also link on the bottom of her email. And then when she sends her emails, you see how these things grow. So, and she is saying she uses Citavi for, which is a bibliographic software primarily for stashing, or in vivo, and I'll come back to one in just a moment. So Citavi is my new bibliographic software, which brings up a reason for me to say that Adrian, who's been using it a long time, has offered in May, middle of May, she will do a Friday with us, but it's not for people just wondering what Citavi is like. It's for people who are using it and who want to know it better. So we have exercises we have to do before we come to the workshop, and it's more of a workshop in May. Okay. And then Max QDA, I will talk about more tomorrow. If you're interested in qualitative software, Adrienne uses NVivo, I use Max QDA. They have many, many things in common, of course. And tomorrow I'm going to talk about coding and qualitative work. So that might be helpful.